while Dante will be remembered as a cruel tyrant. His righteous ideals live on in the people's hearts. In April 2021, Dante was defeated in a battle by a resistance movement led by Technoblade, his attractive general,
Alright, E-boy, what's your perk?
and 5 other randos that honestly nobody remembers. Deep inside a secret lab in the Crimson Isles, an NPC named Aura was studying Dante's reign and exactly where he went wrong, creating what she called a good plan that she would one day be able to show to the world. Where Dante wanted players to obey, she wanted them to thrive. Where Dante wanted order, Aura wanted balance. Under Aura, the players would work not for her, but for each other. Skyblock would be fair again. She just needed a few more years and she'd be ready. A few more years later, a new candidate named Aura appears in the election booth, with vague promises of universal income, increased loot, increased XP, and a few extra little details not worth mentioning. Naturally, this led to many players choosing to support her candidacy, and she comfortably won the election by 1.5 million votes. Immediately, things started to look all too familiar. Goons started popping up all over the hub, the community hub changed to a brand new design, and a whole new prison appeared in the hub where players would be sent if they attacked a goon or typed /kill Aura or insulted Aura in any way. Despite this dictatorial lean to everything, players were excited about where this event would go, expecting something of a repeat of Dante. What happened instead, an hour after the election, was that the election hall opened once again. This time, Aura was looking for 7 players to act as her ministers, and everyone had the ability to cast a single vote for anybody else. So, what now? With millions of players and only 7 minister slots available, who was going to rule Skyblock? Immediately, there were some pretty clear frontrunners. Popular YouTubers such as 30virus and Refraction were highly voted on virtue of being popular. Not content with just sitting on the sidelines, however, many players took it upon themselves to campaign for their right to rule Skyblock through various interesting means. One streamer, Future77, campaigned on the incredibly popular platform of adding his own internal organs to the game, whilst others attempted the more tried and tested method of political success, bootlicking propaganda campaigns. Cheating by updating your popular Skyblock mod to automatically vote for a candidate when you open the menu, which by the way is a literal crime, or in the case of Mr. Faceplate, nepotism and family political dynasties. You might have never heard of Mr. Faceplate before, but you almost certainly know of him as Technoblade's dad. Technoblade was not allowed to be voted as a candidate due to his legendary status, but keen to honor his legacy, Technodad rallied the community in a Reddit post asking people to support him for minister in return for bringing back the Year of the Pig event once more.
I'm here today for reasons of shameless self-promotion. You may know that there's an election going on in Hypixel Skyblock. They're going to elect 7 ministers, and I want to be one of them.
Because Skyblock is a video game, it was actually possible to win elections by campaigning on issues people actually care about. And this was the strategy employed by I'm a Squid Kid.
We all have to stop gooning in the hub.
One of Aura's perks slowed down the speed of all minions by 50%, and Squid Kid was not happy about this. Vote for him, and your minions could once again work at full speed. For his bravery in standing up to the tyranny of Aura, he was rewarded with a prison cell in the hub. Finally, there was the fight for 6th and 7th places. Refraction pretty comfortably had one of these spots because, you know, he's popular. But 7th place was a tight race between Celestial Milk, Duralius, Candypat, and 2NFG. Celestial Milk and Duralius campaigned together, but only had 10,000 votes combined. A candidate needed around 6,000 votes for 7th place, and if they both kept trying, then neither of them would win. Celestial Milk made the decision to drop out and tell her supporters to vote for Duralius, securing his place in the top 7. But wait, who the hell's 2NFG? If you only joined the community in the last 4 years, you've probably never heard of this guy. 2NFG is an infamous cheater who gathered enough support in the Dante Resistance event to become one of Technoblade's resistance generals despite being banned and wiped. He had since retired from the game, but having his ban expire after so long, there was really no reason he couldn't actually be elected this time. He thought long and hard for a platform to campaign on, and eventually came up with the catchy and memorable slogan, "Vote to NFG and he will fix everything and fix all your problems and make Skyblock great again," over a minute-long video with copyright-free music and 2 NFG trapped in a cage. As the elections came to a close, the admin behind the whole event, Jaya Varman, messaged all of the top candidates on Discord explaining what was going to happen next. Until now, nobody really even knew what was this about, but Jaya Varman revealed all. The top 3 ministers get to create a completely custom perk for themselves, which can be anything they want added to the game, and everybody else gets to pick a strong perk from a pre-made list of perks. But more crucially, some of these perks revealed that this would not be the only minister election. There was going to be more. One of these perks, Voice of the People, granted all ministers 5,000 votes to use in the next election, effectively allowing them to almost single-handedly elect their successor. Another, Long-Term Investment, allowed the candidate to run once again in the next election. What was once thought to be a single sprint to take part in a one-off event became a marathon, and players began scheming on how to keep their political goals alive for as long as possible. By the time these messages were sent around, the voting, which was public, looked something like this, with CandyBat in 7th place and SquidKid in 8th. Derelius saw this and encouraged SquidKid to stream and promote his campaign once again to ensure that he would win 7th place spot. Not because he particularly liked SquidKid's campaign, but because he had devised a plan of masterful political shithousery. By ensuring SquidKid won this election, one of his most popular opponents could not stand in the next election, meaning he would have an easier time getting his fiancée Celestial Milk elected alongside with him next time. A couple hours later, the elections concluded and the winners were 30, Techno's Dad, Future, Derail, SquidKid, 2NFG and Refraction in that order. CandyPat lost out by just 115 votes, and 30virus had an absolute landslide majority. 30 chose to add a new pet, Techno's Dad chose to add Year of the Pig related items, Future stayed true to his word and added his internal organs in the form of Kudra accessories, Derelius stuck with his plan and chose long-term investment so he could run again, SquidKid was thrown into the prison cell in the hub and wasn't able to play the game or leave until players eventually dug him out by giving themselves tetanus with rusty spoons. Yes, this was a real mechanic, and both Refraction and 2NFG likely had their perks chosen by admins. An extra bonus winner of this event was Nope the Gamer, whose personal perk was a 30-day ban for adding the feature that types Hannibal 2's name into the voting menu to Skyhanny. Once more, the doors of the election swung open and the 5-day election campaign for the second set of ministers began. This time, the stakes were higher. Everyone knew what they could get for coming top 3, and most of the popular YouTubers were ineligible for the elections because they were already ministers, which meant that getting elected as a regular player was so much easier this time. However, it's worth noting that not everyone was quite so enthusiastic about Aura. Whilst having 50 mayor perks every election was nice, none of them were quite as impactful as the perks of the standard mayors, especially not Cole and his mining fiesta. This, combined with the fact that some people were hoping to be the heroes that would defeat Aura and return Skyblock to some sense of normalcy, began to fuel an underground resistance movement. Headed by ZJ2, not to be mistaken by the 2JZ, and 250mm Midas, this group began small before Aura was even elected, trying to get people to vote for literally anyone else and staging protests in a few hub lobbies. Like a true American politician, ZJ2 made videos decrying his political opponent as a communist who would destroy the economy. After Aura 1 and minister elections began, the group started trying to get its own members elected, whilst very occasionally putting up a little bit of resistance. Other communities quickly formed too, including one by Blockhead James, who began a series of live-streamed minister debates between popular candidates. ZJ2 was invited to one of these, alongside a last-minute competitor, Confused_Goon, someone styling themselves as one of Aura's goons who had somehow wandered into the voting booth. Confused_Goon was odd. Nobody had heard of him before, his profile was brand new, and he didn't have an answer for what perk he wanted. and he used a very obvious AI voice changer in these debates.
My plans are to bring Skyblock back to its former glory. Thank you.
If you come for the people, I promise you, and I do not mean to mince my words at all, I promise you, I will come for you.
Aura, what the fuck?
For the people.
It didn't take a genius to figure out this was probably Squid on an alt, given the account's name history included used code Squid. But it would have been so much cooler if it was code HellCastle, which gives you 5% off on everything on the HyPixel store. Oh my god, and it supports us a lot. Thank you. But most people didn't know or didn't care, and just assumed him to be a special NPC or something as part of the event. Confused Goon eventually won this election in first place, deciding to once again remove one of Aura's negative perks that buffed all enemies' health and damage by 10%.
In fact, I think he should be removed and thrown in jail with Squid Kid.
Once again, he was also imprisoned in a newly rebuilt cage in the hub. Players who passed by the zoo exhibit could either vote for his release or vote against his release in exchange for a temporary 2-hour magic find buff, which everyone decided is worth more than his release and voted overwhelmingly to keep him in prison that whole week. The rest of the election was relatively standard though, with primarily YouTubers and community members promising to add something cool to the game without any funny drama worth talking about. Duralius's plan worked, getting both himself and his fiancée Celestial Milk elected, alongside Fear, Interests, and Lojimbo. The third election came around, and the Resistance did the most anti-Aura thing possible, joining in with the event and trying to get elected with their own mining-based perks. Sure, man. Aside from that, the third election was probably the least eventful out of the 9, with the minister slots being taken up by a bunch of YouTubers like Dragoon, Kudra, ZJ2, Flame of War, Toadstar, Enter, and Drumbit Quadlet. All chose decent perks. The fourth election was also pretty uneventful, but the aftermath was not. Celestial Milk won first place by promising an item called Pepper Spray, which skips annoying dialogues in dungeons, and CandyPad got revenge for his first election loss by promising to give everyone jolly presents and capybaras. These two were joined by Refraction, Lojimbo, Aland, Jules, and To Be Determined as the other 5 ministers. CandyPad, however, was not here to give people jolly presents, not even a single capybara. He instead created a new perk called Public Surveillance, which required players to check in at Surveillance Goon every 30 minutes in the hub, or else they'd lose 10% of all of their Skyblock stats. A brilliant way to piss literally everyone off. That wasn't limited to combat stats either. You'd lose 10% of your magic find, so if you were grinding, you had to come to a Surveillance Goon every half an hour to get better drops. This level of minor annoyance was met by the totally not at all unreasonable response of death threats towards CandyPad for daring to reduce people's stats by 10%. Not to mention, one of Celestial Milk's perks was increasing everyone's stats by 10% anyway, so people technically weren't actually losing anything. Rumors even spread that he was doxed over this. In less than a day, CandyPad asked the admins to remove this perk because death threats aren't worth a bit of trolling. At least his promise to add Capybara was true, as the admins are currently still working on a Capybara pet. After a player had become a top 3 minister, they were no longer able to be elected again. This meant that as the number of popular players who already won increased, the minister slots became much more open to Skyblock's lesser-known players who were eccentric enough to try and make a name for themselves. One such group of these people was the Bingo community, led by Knight Libra, who set up the incredibly boringly named Minister Election for Secret Bingo community, who wanted to add a new secret bingo event to the game, which is basically a normal bingo event, but each of the goals aren't revealed until somebody completes them for the first time. Against the bingoers was Alawi. Alawi is a popular YouTuber a little bit late to the party, who campaigned to give all 7 ministers in his winning election a custom perk rather than just the top 3. This was very popular, but there was a problem. People couldn't spell Alawi, and also were apparently too blind to look at the leaderboard directly in front of them where Alawi in plain text is written with his usual skin, on a large golden platform where first place stands. Because of this, Alawi and Alawi, but spelt with only one I, both placed in the top 7 this election, and an honestly incredible 22% of voters spelled his name wrong. And that's not including those who voted Alawi with one A, or any other spelling with a number too small to show up in the records. Ascent PvP is also a notable name from the 5th election, being the only candidate ever to be disqualified after winning. His wanted perks were all dungeons based, given that he's the owner of an M7 running Discord server, and he also promised to do a face reveal if he won. Around 3 hours before the elections were due to end, he was stuck in 9th place. A moderator for his Discord server saw this and announced a giveaway for people who showed they voted for Ascent PvP, gaining just enough votes in that 3-hour window to edge out 7th place by 69 votes. He briefly released a face reveal in which his fans laughed at him,
"Can you get on all fours, please?"
certified him, ran him through all sorts of AI face stuff. Oh, and he also got disqualified for bribery because giveaway votes aren't allowed, and 7th place was rightfully given back to Rambut Quadlet. The rest of the minister's slots went to Toadstar, Enter, Yikes and Night Libra. Alawi's proposal to give all ministers a perk was rejected for being a loophole and too much work for the admins, so he passed his ministerial perk to Yikes in 5th place because Alawi with one eye is not a real player. Night Libra had lost his chance for a secret bingo, but selected Voice of the People to give himself a shot at electing a friend to be the secret bingo candidate next time. And that candidate in the next election would be the famous Ari the Monkey. When there's electoral bullshit going on, you know he's probably behind it one way or another. Famous for getting Barry elected for the first and only time and spending months trying to obtain a Necron's handle on a bingo profile to no avail, Ari joined the secret bingo cause to be their candidate in the 6th election, in what was probably the least competitive election of the entire event. 7th place won with just 1,900 votes, meaning any one of the minister's votes could elect any candidate, which is exactly what happened with Ari the Monkey, Leomon, and F22 Raptor, who comfortably got 1st, 2nd, and 3rd place, although Ari would have won from organic votes too. In 4th place there was Marina Footlover, who was voted for by 5,459 individual, real, living, and breathing human beings. Not a single one of those was from another minister. Actually, if you remove all of the Voice of the People votes, Marina Footlover comes 2nd this election. Let's not look into that too much. This was also the election where SquidKid's brother, Shady Oat, proposed adding to FA to Skyblock as his minister perk, supported by Yikes Lemau's 5,000 votes. However, Yikes is evil and switched his vote last minute, sending him out of the top 7. Not QC, Mash Clash, and Ascent PvP would take 5th, 6th, and 7th place, with Ascent being allowed to run after his disqualification last time. Nobody quite knew how long this whole aura thing was going to last. It had been well over a month by now, and no signs of a resistance or a change were to be seen anywhere. The admins were already behind on adding new perks, and surely this wouldn't be sustainable long term, but so many people still had ideas, and so many people still wanted to win. The only question was, how much longer did they have to do it? This was the thought on Menacing Banana's mind, who decided it was his turn to run for minister with the fairly inoffensive idea of adding accessories for the greenhouse mutations to the game. Sometime during his campaign, he was messaged by a group of people attempting to rig the minister elections by essentially adopting popular candidates and asking them to promote one of the group's perks in return for their support. This group was actually very small, but it included a couple of current ministers who had Voice of the People votes, which meant their vote would count for 5,000 votes in that election. Menacing fairly understandably didn't like the idea of election rigging and decided he would try and counteract this rigging attempt by trying to get the experienced voters perk for himself. The perk would give all players up to 100 votes each based on how much they had played the game, which meant that the effects of the minister's 5,000 votes were hugely diminished and the elections would be much harder to rig. To the rigging group, this was a declaration of war. Viewing the voting records, you could see that whenever Banana gained a vote, the Ridders made sure to vote for the 8th place candidate to make sure that he was not in the top 7, and continued to campaign in public lobbies against Banana, right up until the last minute where he ended up in 8th place, just 60 votes behind 7th place. The election was so close that some lobbies even showed him as winning in 7th place due to how late the votes were cast. Because experienced voters was active this election, this equated to roughly just the votes of 1 or 2 people. Banana was not happy. He had sent out very annoyed messages to the people who were doing this, and they sent some back rage baiting him. When the election ended, they all joined his island at the same time and started jumping on his crops for getting 8th place, and he crashed out in a 5-minute long, now deleted video, calling the event bad for having the elections decided by a large group of friends behind the scenes and keeping normal players out of the minister slots. The funniest part is that there wasn't actually a group of players rigging every election at all. The winners of the last election had just so happened to make a group chat and talked about where they could cast their votes and were looking for which candidate they wanted to vote for next. Banana kind of had a point about how strong Voice of the People was though, and after a message from Alawi, the admins changed the rules so that the perk could not be chosen 2 elections in a row to prevent such rigging. With menacing Banana safely away from any levers of power, the rest of the Skyblock player base turned to God, in the hopes to find answers to the whole Aura situation. Not spiritually or anything, but at the ballot box, where he easily swept 1st place. God is an account that has never played Skyblock and is banned by Mojang. But let's see what perks God has added. He took the office. He took no actions. The screams left unanswered. For God has abandoned us all. Rembert Quadlet and Lejimbo, who had both already been lesser ministers twice before, finally placed 2nd and 3rd and got their custom perks added. In 4th place was Melankin DE, a character that surely will never come up again in this video. He evidently thought that his life wasn't interesting enough and opted to pick the public surveillance perk. Yes, the same perk that led Candy Pat to receiving death threats and allegedly doxed. For some reason, he picked that. Like, why would you do it again? To be determined, Foraging Mommy and Alan got 5th, 6th, and 7th place in this election. By the 8th election, it was clear that God was not interested in helping the Skyblock players. The players were going to have to take this into their own hands. It was time to Pokemon Go to the polls and vote harder than... Why Pokemon Go? Why did you write this, Tyler? It was time to go to the ballots and vote as hard as they've ever voted. 2 candidates quickly rose to prominence: Keep_Aura and End_Aura. And Mash Clash, but that's honestly way less interesting. I'm sorry, Mash Clash. One side was the ideals of justice, equality, and hard work that Aura had been planning for so long. On the other was the comfortable familiarity of choosing between the same few candidates and perks every week. Voting was fierce, fan art was drawn, and propaganda campaigns were created. Okay, so I feel like I didn't do the art section justice because there's so much amazing fan art drawn. Some of it is from AR12. We have some from Clocky and Girl. We have some other stuff from people like No Series and Celestial Milk, who was also a minister. And AR12 even made a whole 1-minute 30-second animation. I can't show the full thing to you because of copyright stuff, but I'll leave a link to the description. Go watch it. The only thing missing was a Dragon Hatch song, but he lost his account, so that's probably not happening. Keep Aura was the clear frontrunner right up to the last 12 hours, when the 2 candidates were neck and neck, and then started trading 1st and 2nd for hours until the polls eventually closed. In 7th place was Snowflake Kiwi, who voted to remove one of Aura's positive perks, and she spent 5 days in prison unable to play. Why would you remove the positive perk? Then Spears, Ascent PvP, and Notch in 6th, 5th, and 4th. Mash Clash placed 3rd, and in 2nd, End_Aura. Keep Aura won by 2,000 votes, but this didn't matter. And Aura was also entitled to a perk for coming 2nd place, and he chose his custom perk to be Ending Aura. Keep Aura tried to cancel End Aura's perk with his perk, but ministers weren't allowed to interfere with each other. Aura was going to go, but not before one last election. The final election was everybody's last chance at getting their feature added to their favorite part of the game. A land underscore would finally come first and add his Questmaster NPC to the game, and in second place was the player Aura underscore Stay, whose election probably caused Jaya Varman to loudly groan. The rest of the minister slots were filled by YouTubers, with To Be Determined once again just barely missing out on a top 3 slot by 36 votes. But Aura Stay did not actually want Aura to stay. They were a liar. The account was actually owned by Melon King DE, and they did not care about keeping Aura in the slightest. In fact, the admins were so tired of Melon King's trolling that they denied his request for a custom perk. To get revenge, he chose a standard perk that doubled all enemy HP. Double enemy HP! And the second perk that increased all enemy HP by 10% and all enemy damage by another 10%. This pissed off quite literally everyone, and it locked new players completely out of progression for a few days and slowed down everyone doing anything until the perks wore off. When asked about it, Melon King said it was the player's fault for electing a bad candidate, and that's just how democracy works. Everything from memes about Melon King DE's name and some ridiculous edits and comments to a 112-page Google document about harassment between the pair and the other minister to death threats that they were sent their way. It's honestly an impressive commitment to trolling this much, especially in the twilight hours of such a beloved community event. But after this election concluded, all of the goons in the hub had new dialogue, in which they're sad that she's leaving and blamed the minister for not seeing her vision and doing way too much trolling. Aura herself said she is leaving out of honor and to keep true to her principles. You will now be without me. Not because I was overthrown, but because I was no longer welcome. Yeah, Aura, maybe you shouldn't have given a bunch of idiots the freedom to pick outrageous perks. I will finish what I began elsewhere, and when I return, it will be something better. And that was it. 9 elections, 63 ministers, and 45 days of pure chaos and fun later, Aura was gone. Many players tried and failed to get elected, and others just enjoyed the perks and chaos of the whole thing. The event was also a very smart way for the admins to gauge players' wants and frustrations with the game. If players cared enough about something to get a minister elected over it, it's probably something that they need to dedicate some time to tweaking and fixing. Except, I don't know, Marina Foot Lover and God. Like, what do you add there? Apparently they like only one of her feet and not the other because it's being eaten by a fish. As of today, many of the promised perks are still being implemented as the admins didn't have time to work on things over their Christmas break or to add new content for 3 people every 5 days. Aura now once again resides in her lab in the Crimson Isles, plotting her return. Next time, things will be different. You will see. Thank you to all the community members who helped us compile all of the knowledge about this event, and I am so sorry for all of the names I butchered. There's so much we couldn't include whilst keeping this video interesting, and a full documentary could probably go on for over 2 hours. We really hope the admins do more events like this in the future. Okay, thank you for watching. See ya, and have a nice day. And use code HellCastle.